Hi, I'm Ian Brown, Managing Director of Excelpoint, and you're listening to On Point, a podcast brought to you by ourselves. For those of you who haven't heard of Excelpoint, we're a global leader in the development of no-code technology. We help businesses from all around the world to overcome some of their business challenges, update their outdated processes, create business efficiencies, and streamline their business process. We do this by implementing innovative, automated and highly flexible no-code software. Typically we do this 10 times faster than bespoke development. Today we're joined by an extremely successful business professional that has managed and succeeded with several major projects in their existing role, and that's Andy Karran, Strategic Business Portfolio Manager at Copenhagen Infrastructure Services. They're a customer of Excelpoint, and they've used our no-code software to overcome some of their own internal challenges and underpin restrictive practices that was restricting their productivity and their efficiency. So Andy, thanks for joining us here today.
Thanks for having me, Ian.
Yeah, and Strategic Portfolio Manager. I think of you as a data scientist, but as we were chatting before, you're not a data scientist, so what are you?
It's a question I often get asked about my job title. My job basically involves managing a portfolio of renewable generation assets and optimizing them to produce the best possible gross margin, and that can involve managing the power prices or the fuel costs going into the power plant. The reason I get accused of being a data scientist from time to time is because it's a very data heavy role. And over time, you know, the pace of that data has increased, the amount of data has increased. So I'm pulling together lots of streams of large amounts of data. Again, market prices, signals from the national grid in terms of stability and balancing, all of which drive the economics of these assets. And over time, my role has developed to, as I say, as the pace has increased, it's moved from being a person who sits and puts numbers, historical numbers into a spreadsheet to try and work out what we should be doing day by day, to trying to hook into live streams of data and find ways of getting systems to consume that in a way that you know, we can make these decisions on the fly and without constant intervention from people like myself.
Yep.
Yeah, so our aim at the moment, for example, is to try and pull these systems together so that they can manage some of our assets in real time, depending on how power prices are changing. So again, we use data-led systems, and from time to time, you know, that gets conflated with being a data scientist.
I see now where I get that impression. And when we first met, I can remember clearly, we met with the intention of developing a relatively small, modest mobile app.
Yes.
We then met with a team of your people, and that seemed to explode from there into all sorts of different business processes, automation, self-development, which I think the correct modern term for this is citizen developer.
Yeah.
Is there anything you'd like to add about that picture? Because I'm actually not that close to CISC's operation and what you do with our technology, but I at least know where we started.
Yeah. Yeah, as you say, it started out very small. It's coming up to nearly 3 years ago, and I look on it personally as one of the highlights of my career, because you know the way that technology and the projects have gone since Excelpoint came on board has been, you know, really enjoyable and really productive and successful.
Good to
hear. Yeah. As you say, it started out very small. So one of our or two of our power plants were looking for a mobile app where the power plant operators could capture information about fuel as it arrived at the power plant. They've analysed the fuel and have decided whether to accept or reject the fuel. It became lovingly known as the rejection app. And you know, we're trying to replace a paper-based form where those operators would fill in a short questionnaire, capture some information, and then they take pictures with their mobile phones, and then when they get time in their busy day jobs to get to a computer, collate all this information, put it into an email. They would then send it on its way to the team who needed to know about it, so the logistics managers, the fuel managers. And it was a really obvious low-hanging fruit in terms of improving a process using data-driven systems. We're capturing, again, fast-moving information and processing it very slowly on a piece of paper. And instead, the Excelpoint system, very quickly we were able to build up with your team's expertise and put together something which allowed them to capture in real time on a device, on a mobile device, take all the pictures they need, capture all the information they need in a structured way, so that the information was stored in a logical way and immediately disseminated to everybody who needed to know about it. So it made an instant improvement in a fairly basic process, but it had a very wide-ranging impact. And from there, the potential to grow was very clear. And we've rolled out the system to do many other tasks since then, and many more plans to go from there.
I know something we did with yourselves. It's not unique, but we don't do it with all customers, and it was quite intriguing for me. So not all of these podcasts have customers features, by the way. And we held a hothouse session at one of your plants.
Yeah.
Had about a dozen people around the table. Went through all of the, I'll call it discussion and arbitration. I think it was arguments and conflagration to some degree. Make sense of all of that. And we were doing this on a big screen. I can remember this really clearly. And you had, I think, your customer represented, who was the voice in the room, if I can put it that way. And by the end of that hothouse session, he basically said, right, I think we've got it. We've captured everything. If you can build that, that's what we want. And there was a crystallizing moment when he realized, actually, we've just about built that. This is it. We're building it now. And that's how no code can make a big difference. Engage with the real people doing the real jobs at that moment, and extract that information, shorten the communication channels right down, so there is no scope. Well, scope creep can still happen, but the opportunity for that to happen is massively reduced. And that was quite interesting. So I see that as a real sort of defining moment in the early stages of working with yourselves.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I think it was after that they said, and we've got all of these other processes that we want to move on to.
As you've identified, there's often a lot of conflict in these situations. Our role in CISC is to step in and almost mediate between the plant owner, who wants just the best margin from the plant, the plant operator, who might be a third party, who wants to just maintain the asset and make sure it works and according to some very strict design principles, and a fuel supplier, who obviously just wants to get as much of their fuel into the plant as possible. And all of these things can conflict all of the time. And as you say, rather than get these people into a room and try to have a business analysis session where you don't necessarily get a clear agreement, and then you go away and try and develop something that nobody can see, and then you bring it back to the room, everybody argues again. Whereas, on the screen, you can steer gradually towards an agreed, accepted solution, and people can start to see it take shape. A lot of the users that we work with now, they refer to themselves as visual people. They say, I'm a very visual person. And what's better for that kind of person than to put it up on a screen in front of them, and they can literally see the software take shape before their eyes.
Change this, change that, do.
Exactly, it's just nudge this, nudge, and it's I think of it almost like a photo fit, putting together an image and someone just describes it, and you say, do you mean this? Yes, okay, or just nudge it that way, and very quickly you can get to an acceptable solution, and then just develop it slightly from there to make it all work more smoothly.
Just interested, so that sort of very interactive hothouse approach, putting hothouse we refer to when it's got multiple stakeholders involved, because you're pressurizing that situation to get the maximum out of it.
Yeah.
And you might not do that. You might do that with just individuals representing parts of the process.
Yeah.
But is that a technique that you had used previously or didn't really have available, but you have now?
I would say the phrase we've definitely adopted, because we had a hothouse only this week internally to design some other new application of your software. It's probably it's not specifically a technique we'd use. I mean, personally, I don't really think of myself as an IT professional. I kind of hold you personally accountable for the fact I'm starting to become one.
Thanks for that.
Because again, originally these systems we were putting together and continue to develop, we became involved in this because I'm a customer of these systems. It's my job to take lots of data from these systems and to analyze it and to drive business decisions from it. And at the time, those systems didn't really serve me well as a customer. They may have served other individuals in that environment well, but what we saw was an opportunity to bring people together and develop systems that did work for everybody. So we were able to get those people in a room and get them to an acceptable solution that also met my requirements and my team's requirements. And from there, we've just got more and more involved as IT service providers, as well as just general service providers. So yeah, the hothouse, it's not a phrase we would have ever used before. It's not, it's generally not something we would have been involved in before we got involved with you guys.
Might also be partly because our technology being so quick lets you do that hothouse thing where other technologies you might be operating at a slow pace and you just can't physically do it with an audience,
Yeah.
I know earlier you mentioned, much earlier in the cycle, a reliance on spreadsheets.
Yeah.
So it's a very common thing in the industry. You can go to businesses and their mission critical systems are well sorted out. But around the edges, lots of spreadsheets.
Yeah.
Spreadsheets for analysis, spreadsheets for financial, the old data science aspect.
Yeah.
And spreadsheets have a place, but there's also lots of spreadsheets that are used as databases.
Exactly.
And I know that's dear to your heart as well.
Yeah.
The eradication of that sort of thing.
Yeah. I mean, we've talked about different ways that we receive data, and often it would have been things like paper forms. It's also phone calls, emails, but yeah, spreadsheets are often used as a way of not just analysing, but storing and sharing data. And, from a structural point of view, there's a lot of weaknesses and a lot of issues with that. As you say, they've got their place, and what you want is the best of both. You want the flexibility of a spreadsheet, the ability to sort of designate. You can point at a spreadsheet and say, this field, this column in this spreadsheet is now going to be called this, and you type a heading and off you go. And you start capturing data. And then, you share that spreadsheet with someone and they get your data, but then they misinterpret that and decide to start capturing some other piece of data in that field in some other way, which then starts to, you break a formula or something which relies on that spreadsheet, and very quickly you see the weaknesses of the spreadsheet. So again, going back to your product, it's the strength of it is that you've still got that flexibility. You can very quickly design a field and say, this is the field, this is the heading, this is what we're going to use it for, and straight away it's locked down, and that's what it does. And then you're not just designating a field in a spreadsheet. That's storing data in a nice structured way in a database in your hosted infrastructure that you can then use and disseminate that data in the right way.
Yeah. So I know in the last certainly 2 to 3 years, your business unit, is business unit the right terminology for your?
Yeah, I would say so. Yeah.
In your business unit, there's been significant change and significant change of focus as well as just change. I think business changes all the time. So you've risen to challenges, solved challenges, you see future challenges and opportunities.
Yep.
So that change must bring quite a lot of competing pressures within the organisation. Is there anything you'd like to say about that, and how your unit have adapted and changed over time?
Yeah, I mean, it's an unusual business. So for me personally, I come from an energy background. For like the last 10 years or so, I've worked in energy, but mainly in big energy companies, where everything is done according to the big energy model. CISC is a much smaller company, and we have to be much more agile because we're servicing much newer assets and much smaller assets and much more diverse assets. And these power plants are also operated by third parties, and that means that from day to day, the way that you do business might change because you're working alongside a different third party, or it's a new power plant, a new technology, always very different challenges. So you can't sort of build a very nice big system that does everything, because tomorrow that won't be the thing that you're doing.
Yeah.
We need a system that's agile and can very quickly be pointed at some new task, and can be changed in order to optimize some very different thing. We historically were very focused on biomass, and our company name was CI Biomass rather than CI Service Company. We now look at a portfolio of wind generation, solar, and the emerging and very cryptically named P2X technology.
I was going to ask about P2X.
Yeah, so P2X is, we refer to it as P2X because it's power to X, which means you're taking power and converting it to something. And the reason why P2X is emerging as a technology now globally is mainly because of intermittent power generation, such as wind. And it's a problem that's talked about all the time, that the wind blows and you don't know when it's going to blow, and there's a need for power, and you're going to get some power, but you don't know when, and it doesn't necessarily balance with when the demand is there. So intermittent generation technologies put extra strain on the grid, and it's a very difficult task to balance the grid and to make sure enough power is there when it's needed, and even sometimes that there's not too much power going into the grid when it's not needed, and to be able to store that energy in efficient ways. All of which, mainly to drive a stable grid and energy security and lower electricity bills for me and you.
Yep.
So P2X is primarily at the moment, we're focusing on taking wind generation and converting electricity to hydrogen using simple electrolysis, as everyone's done in, I guess it was chemistry lessons back at school, or.
Yep.
Yeah. So and for me, that's a fascinating and an interesting application of my work, because again, it's taking real time, rapidly changing power prices, and other changing assumptions and plant performance sort of spec and all sorts of data, and trying to make real time decisions about what to do, whether this power should go into the grid or it should go into generating hydrogen, or we're also looking at storing excess heat from power plants, or all kinds of things. So yeah, very interesting data-driven stuff.
What is interesting as well is I like to think of Excelpoint as forward-thinking, innovative, agile. It's what we need to be to exist in our sector. But you're a really good customer of ours, and what I mean by that is you get our technology, you understand it and adapt it and use it in innovative ways. And I think culturally, when I listen to you speak, CISC are forward-thinking and innovative and agile. So culturally, although we're in totally different sectors, we're probably very synergistic in the way we approach the problems that we face, and that's why it's a good match.
Yeah, I think so.
You know, it's interesting.
Yeah.
And the other thing, I don't explain this by any means, but it did strike me as you described that. We all at home flick a light switch and the light comes on and we take it for granted. And I don't even begin to understand balancing the grid and surges and you see, that is just something we take absolutely for granted, everybody in the country.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of complexity goes on behind the scenes. Add into that, you know, renewables and P2X and all of that for a sustainable future.
Yeah.
You know, it's a hugely innovative environment to be in at this point in time.
Absolutely, it's a massive area, and you know, I can't pretend to understand balancing the grid and all that technical stuff myself, you know. But what's very clear is that, you know, the grid is evolving, and the network operators, the regional and national network operators, have very good systems and very good ways of monitoring the grid, and they use commercial signals to generators and also to large consumers to help them balance the grid. And it's up to us to get better at hooking into those signals and using them. You know, it's not just the job of the big, you know, old coal and gas power stations to do this anymore. It's up to all of us renewable generators as well to hook into these signals and use them. And, you know, we can use them to our advantage and to theirs.
Yeah. I was going to ask a bit of a stupid question. I thought, would you say that the UK are at the leading edge in the world of renewables? But I've just realised I should be really asking, are the Danes at the leading edge? Because for those listening, Copenhagen Infrastructure, obviously a Danish company.
Yeah.
I mean, at the leading edge?
Yeah, I would say in many ways the UK and Denmark, you know, we've each got a lot to offer. It's a global race, the P2X, and you know, the Danes are massive players in that. You know, not just Copenhagen Infrastructure in terms of going out there and investing and operating these assets, but you know, there are big Danish interests in the construction side, and also in the UK in terms of the P2X technologies. That, you know, we've got market leaders here who go and install that technology around the world, and it is becoming a global business. A lot of the larger countries in the East that you might associate with old fossil technology are starting to adopt and turn to more green technology.
Anything you'd like to ask me? It's not the CISC show. You can ask me anything if you wish.
I suppose, you know, I'm interested to know, as a customer, more about what's coming down the pipeline from Excelpoint, and what sort of, you know, how you listen to signals from customers and how you use that to decide where to take your product next.
Well, we have some exciting stuff coming down the pipeline. We've got a new release that will be out Q1 next year that I can't say too much about at the moment. We're involving our customer base in not just that release, but the product direction, full stop.
Yeah.
As a software vendor, lots of software vendors do this, we will have introduced functionality to our product because we think it's a good idea. And when we look at the customer base, certain bits of functionality don't get used very much. So we're trying to bring key customers into a close fold where not only does Excelpoint benefit from their insight, what are the burning issues for our customers that we can address, but those customers can then learn from each other. I think there's a lot of hype in the industry around no-code and low-code platforms, but customers that are doing those things successfully, they have a part to play and they can help others to be successful with their projects. So that virtuous circle between customers, partners and ourselves driving into our development roadmap is key for us. We have a version coming out before Q1 next year, so 3.10 will be out soon with other functional improvements. And we'll run all of that past CISC and others. But I think that the biggest sort of news lurking in the background is Q1 next year when we've got some more major announcements to make. And I think that'll benefit all of our customers.
Yep.
And what long-standing customers will now start to see. We've got some customers that go back 15 years, and they've been through a number of technological advancements as the technology waves come and go. And because they're built on no code, they've been able to upgrade and upgrade and upgrade, and they are migrating to newer and newer technologies all the time without having to revisit and recode and refactor large parts of what they've developed.
I think that's
massive.
I would say that's something that you sold the product to us on, all those 3 years ago, and it's only now I start to realise exactly what that means. Now that we've built this system up, and we've got our no-code platform, and we've developed, systems which we now rely on day to day, and knowing that in the background, that's all going to be upgraded overnight. It's going to, when the time comes, it's going to switch over to a new technology, and it's all still going to work. Our configuration will be portable between those two things. It's one of the strengths of the software for us.
We had a much smaller customer than yourselves, funnily enough, in the domiciliary care sector, which is just being covered in a different podcast, and they had effectively generation 1 of our product, which was for the techies out there, the nerds. It was a classic ASP DCOM development. We went to .NET, we went to fully responsive Bootstrap, and they went from their product running on our old classic ASP version 1, as it were, and jumped forward to the point where, we can now use it on our mobile phones while we're not in the office. And that was a 20-minute upgrade. And they were absolutely gobsmacked.
Yeah.
And that's a smallish customer who probably didn't look at what was the financial benefit of that. If we hadn't been able to push a button and upgrade, what was the burden we were going to endure?
Yeah.
They just saw it as a bit of wizardry and magic, and that's great.
Yeah.
But in reality, that burden that is stored up from the past, it's a technical debt that you're holding in the background, is also significant. So it's not just speed, agility, time to market. No code offers a lot of benefits to organisations like yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah. Andy, it's been really interesting. I've actually learned a bit about CISC and the grid, power generation, and I will get closer occasionally to your projects. It's been really useful and nice to have you here.
Thanks, Ian.